The simple truth is that there's always this temptation with Home Secretaries. I mean, you can remember it with David Blunkett, you can remember it with Charles Clarke and John Reid, of trying to be very tough in their talk. And very often, the less good a job they can do, the more they're failing, the tougher the talk gets.
In the early debate on the King's Speech, some Conservative MPs spoke out against one of the measures included in the criminal justice package unveiled by Rishi Sunak. It includes giving police the power to enter a property without a warrant to seize stolen goods when they have a reasonable proof that a specific item, stolen item, is inside. But they could do all this without a warrant. Well, the Conservative former Cabinet Minister, David Davis, joins me now. David, could you support this, allowing police to search homes without a warrant?
No, I couldn't. Now, look, for centuries, this country has been rather distinctive, actually, in not allowing agents of the government, particularly the police, to come into your front door without getting approval from the judiciary, without getting a judge to give them, as a warrant or a commission of some sort. And this the demand for this, or the request for this, from the various agencies happens all the time. I mean, I talked yesterday to a minister who said he had to turn down HMRC, the tax authorities, who wanted to have that power just to come into your house and search your house without so much as to buy your leave. And for a very long time, we've not allowed the police to do it, except under very limited circumstances. If they think a crime is happening, murder's going on in the house, or they're chasing somebody and running to their own house, that doesn't get them off the hook, as it were. But more generally, they have to have cause. And the judge of that cause is not the policemen themselves, it's a magistrate, normally a duty magistrate, on the end of a telephone, and they call up and say, look, we have this evidence, we have this, and you may have to send him the evidence, and he'll give them the approval. And it's a fundamental right in British law and British constitution that is on the same par with jury trials, presumption of innocence, all of those things. And so it's a very, very bad idea.
And what's going on in the Home Office that a Conservative Home Secretary thinks this is okay? Is it a misunderstanding of the law? Is it a misunderstanding of civil liberties?
Well, I think there's a mixture of things happening. I mean, firstly, let's be clear. The pressure to do things like this, the pressure to erode our liberties and the rule of law, happens under all parties. I mean, the worst cases were actually under Blair, not under Conservative governments. But there are two things that happen. One is ministers are just weak; they give in to the demand from their own bureaucracies. In this case, the police bureaucracy. You just want, this is nice, easy and convenient for them, if you like. Not important, but it's convenient. There's partly it's weak ministers, partly it's people trying to look tough. I mean, I'm afraid, the days when Home Secretaries had great levels of gravitas and were above the fray and handed down, as it were, comments of wisdom on tablets of stone are long in the past, probably 50, 30 years in the past. But the truth is that people want to look like they're being tough. We are having an initiative on being tough on crime, tightening up on sentencing and so on. That's a good idea. But I think the tendency to try and look tough tends to spill into other areas, and this is one of them. And that's what's going on a bit here, I suspect.
David, you and I have known each other for a long time. I remember watching you from the gallery in the House of Commons when you were Shadow Home Secretary on the Home Affairs Select Committee as well, taking to task Labour Home Secretaries who got themselves in all sorts of messes. They tried to talk tough. They got in a mess. You actually had quite a good track record of prizing them out of office. What do you make of what exactly Suella Braverman's up to in the Home Office, putting forward, the police can kick your door down without a warrant, while floating ideas that people should be kicked out of tents because there's a lifestyle choice if they're homeless, which even the Prime Minister seems to be trying to step away from, feeling a bit squeamish about. If she was on the other side in a different party, you'd be having an absolute field day with her track record in the Home Office, wouldn't you?
Well, there are members of my party who say that doesn't protect her much. She's on our side. I was described the other day by one of my colleagues as semi-detached, and I argued with the semi bit of it. The simple truth is that there's always this temptation with Home Secretaries. I mean, you can remember it with David Blunkett, you can remember it with Charles Clarke and John Reid, of trying to be very tough in their talk. And very often, the less good a job they can do, the more they're failing, the tougher the talk gets. There's lots of theories in the papers about this being a sort of long-term leadership bid. If it is, I think it's very ill-founded. It's not going to work because it annoys as many people as it wins over. It's also a misreading of the electorate. I mean, after the big swing in the red wall seats to us in 2019, a number of my colleagues thought that the way to win elections was to be very right-wing, very authoritarian, very hard on certain groups, whether they're migrants or certain types of criminals. They're underestimating their own electorate. The electorate understand quite well what's going on here, and they won't like the idea of giving excessive powers to the police. We have in the last decade or two seen the police fit people up, bring fraudulent evidence, shoot the wrong person in the case of Jean-Charles de Menezes, all of the recent things about the sex crimes of some, and indeed a murder carried out by one officer. So I think the tendency on the part of the public to believe the police and want to give them intrinsic powers, trust them with powers, is not very high. And I think actually at the end of the day, my colleagues reflect that. You know, the members of parliament reflect their constituents. So I think if Suella is trying to, as it were, build her standing for a future leadership bid, this is not the way to do it. And in any event, I would argue, you're quite right. I will argue. I mean, it won't protect her. She's on the Tory side. When we come to debate this as a proposal in law,
Yeah.
I will make a big deal of it. And I have to tell you, when I raised it in the House of Commons yesterday, I was quite surprised at how many people were nodding at that part of the speech on my side as well as the other side. Quite often, I irritate some of my colleagues because they don't like me highlighting these things. But on this, they were obviously very clearly concerned. And indeed, Jacob Rees-Mogg picked it up in his speech. I mean,
Yeah.
it doesn't take much to provoke Jacob to quote Pitt the Elder, but that's what he was doing a little later on in the debate.
David Davis, good to speak to you. Former Conservative cabinet minister, Conservative MP, on that plan to enter property without a warrant to seize goods. And actually, on the question of what exactly Suella Braverman is up to, there's a new polling out yesterday from YouGov asked to what extent do you think people sleeping in tents on the streets are doing so as a lifestyle choice. 6% of people said, I think for most it is a lifestyle choice, rising to 8% of Conservative voters. Most said they didn't think it was a lifestyle choice by some margin.